Hi and welcome everybody to the SUSE QE Tools workshop. We are at the beginning of a new month, and that's why we would like to talk about the SUSE QE Tools roadmap. The last one we had in the beginning of June, on the 7th of June, and since then we had important events. For example, we had within the SUSE QE Tools team the opportunity to meet for an in-place workshop. Also, many of us visited the OpenSUSE conference, which was also a great opportunity to meet other users using the products from the QE Tools team. We had interesting discussions about OpenQA as well as experiences from other communities with their QE approaches or their automated testing infrastructure. And but still in that time, since the last month, we managed to solve some tickets. And most and foremost, I would like to mention that we finally managed to finish off one saga, which is the migration to a new QE setup in the new SUSE data centers. And we had planned to do that migration while ensuring availability. So that's why most of you didn't feel a bigger impact of that. And also in the past months, we didn't have so much to do there anymore. It was basically like individuals' machines which were still waiting to be brought back up, maybe some cabling missing, maybe some network or firewall configuration, or just finding a proper new use for machines which are maybe hadn't been used anymore, or actually new hardware which was also brought online. So with that, we also finished those epics here who have a complete QE setup. We had the OpenQA related setup in Prague 2 already for longer, and now that's the everything regarding non-OpenQA, which concerns us as a SUSE QE Tools team, because we are the maintainers of that infrastructure for all the other purposes which go beyond OpenQA, like for manual testing as well. And also with that, as I mentioned, we finished the OpenQA part, but also other services which we do provide from that data center. Besides that, we had managed to finish some other epics. Most of them are related to the next saga in line about full version control awareness. And as you can see, most of them actually mention something about a Git or needle storage or CI runs or Git repositories. So they're all related. Now the result of that is that we have a much better place in current upstream behavior regarding how one can define tests. And we already shared that example sometimes, that, for example, the example distribution, Force Ordnance History example, has all of its tests defined within the same Git repository that defines the test plan as well as the test modules, which is acting as a showcase, especially for new projects, but existing projects like the main OpenSUSE Sleet test distribution, which we call Osado. That one is using the former approach, which so far is, of course, still fully supported, just allowing more and different approaches, especially for products or workflows that are not yet covered by OpenQA. Some specific tickets which we can mention. Let me take a look. We had already in the past, in before, an update of some of the dependencies in our stack, for example, going to Bootstrap 5. And let me just show you, if you go to the main index page of OpenQA, maybe you see very subtle changes like in those buttons. Also, if we just take a look on one of the latest test overviews, like let's take a look here. Then you can see that those rounded boxes look a little bit different, but functionally, of course, all is the same. Then there was one bug which showed up, is that this highlighting, which is visible here when you hover over those icons to see the related jobs. Now, if I hover over here, that's the controller, then it highlights which is the child in light blue, and vice versa. If I go to the child, then we can see the parent in this light red color. And that was broken, unnoticed actually by automated tests. So we didn't have any automated tests to see that highlighting. And now we fixed that regression based on a user report, but also we did include that in our testing. Actually, that was an opportunity for us to consider, should we cover that in our OpenQA test? But here actually we selected it. We thought it would be more lightweight and still well maintainable if we do that in our Selenium based OpenQA test. Then what else? We had an issue that the main OpenQA SUSE QE instance was not accessible, and that happened due to possibly an unplanned reboot, which basically can happen whenever also the hypervisor host triggers all the VMs to shut down and power on again, maybe when the hypervisor itself needs to reboot. The problem that happened is that because we have multiple multi-terabyte file systems, and by coincidence, multiple of those were triggered on boot to conduct a file system check, but then XFS repair is using up all of the memory, and if multiple of those processes can come together, which is noted here, then we can run into an out-of-memory condition. That's a caveat which is already known upstream, and so far we are not aware of any plans to fix or improve that. So it's basically something that we need to live with, and we applied multiple mitigations for that. For example, we considered patching the actual XFS repair to use different options to actually limit the memory, which is also what we do to like manually explicitly ensure that all file systems are fine, but also effectively we have now disabled the automatic file system check, which could be triggered on boot, especially because we ourselves do not have direct access to the hypervisor. So we would rather prefer if the system comes up and it is least reachable over SSH, even if services would fail, and then we can log in and check the mount points, check the file systems, which are all the non-root file system, and then ensure that services also come up properly. In light of that, we also looked into the effect of the NFS server and the according mount points that are used on the workers, on some of the workers, because using NFS should be really considered non-standard for production tests here. But we found a problem that, if one of those file systems which would need check are not coming up, the NFS server could still start on an empty directory, which afterwards, if the intended file system comes up, is then overlaid, causing further problems. So what we did there is basically also define explicit proper dependencies correctly in systemd and the mount point, so that the NFS server would really only come up if the correct mount point is filled after being mounted from the according partition. I guess there are some more tickets related to that, which are not showing up as high, but maybe further below. So what else? Let me take a look. What's interesting to note? we had a problem on false audience tests for S390, which was, let me remember, I think it was interesting, but it was also interesting. So thanks to Adam Will for handling that. Okay, right. So this is basically about the not too old new module here, which is not usable per se on some architectures, depending on. So now this is restricted to only where we know that this is explicitly supported. And if a need would arise to support that on other architectures, I don't know the details, but I guess a bit more brain power would need to be invested to understand what would be needed there. What else? Let me check. Yeah, we implemented a check into the worker registration so that a worker which is connected to a remote instance doesn't register by like it's not allowed to register by with the name localhost, because that could be quite misleading, and which was also the motivation for coming up with that, because on OpenGA OpenSUSE.org there was one host due to misconfiguration connected to the main web UI and caused problems, but then it just called itself localhost, so it's even a bit tricky to identify which machine that would be. So because we knew that this is a misconfiguration, and probably in also any other case that's probably not really desired, then by default that's now prevented. I'm saying by default because as necessary, that's actually still possible to do. Then regarding the test definitions in a Git repository, I already mentioned the example distribution, but we also use it in OS Audience Distri OpenQA. So this was also a small ticket, but still I would like to show the outcome because it can illustrate how with just by using plain YAML features, test definitions can be structured a bit more cleanly. So here, this is the OpenGA test for OpenGA, so the OpenGA in OpenGA test. And if you take a look into the scenario definition files, we can see that this file is really not too long. It's just 69 lines. And what was implemented there lately are those machine defaults where you can see for 64-bit 2G, there are some settings which are defined, which are reused in the 4G case, but of course, QEMU RAM differs in implementation. Similar here, where this feature of using a hash merge, the common settings are applied to all those cases, and here common 4G is used, so that one, the multi-machine test, which is a bit more heavy and then needs more memory, is using different settings. So this is just plain YAML, which is possible in here because we have the complete test definitions within that file. And with that, we have the complete test definitions, including product settings, machine settings, and the connection to the Git repository within that test distribution. So we finished the Bootstrap upgrade in that time period. What else? We extended the documentation for single instance container covering how to trigger and clone tests. So if you just take a look on open.qa/docs in the documentation, we already had that how to run a test with single instance container in 5 minutes with a really nice animation showing that in action. But then also the next section here explains how that setup can be used to schedule and monitor tests or cloning an existing JAP with a reference to the user's guide for more details on triggering tests. That's of course specific to that case for the single instance container, but if you have any other setup, but then of course also those commands can be used like it. like stated here. So the restart of scheduled products is prone to retrigger by humans. Let me check if that one had. Yeah, so this one is showing the old UI. Let me see if I can. Oops, sorry, I can't easily show that. But this is showing the old UI with this quite similar circle arrow showing icons. One is for just retriggering that one job already, including some kind of the cluster dependencies, if any, and then also another one which looks like it wouldn't be a big deal, but then in the end could cause that complete products, like 1,000 of tests being retriggered accidentally. And the main thing which was done here, I mean, we also observed there was a problem in the actual implementation, which jobs are considered for restarting. But then also the main point was that the button was refreshed. So let me just pick any recently finished test like this one. And there's no button here. And for the users with the according authentication, log in here and show you now that's more explicit. There's just a restart job here because this is like really just a single job which doesn't have any relation to the bigger products. Now, if we select a job which is part of a bigger group, and let's pick one example which might be a bit more complicated, like this target job. This is a child job which needs to have the parent run in parallel. So if we would want to restart that job, then really it would make sense to say restart this and dependent job, which would mean that we would trigger two jobs, right? There are advanced jobs and advanced options here. Like all of those, there's a help explaining that, and then there's rescale product from here. It's already red, and if I just click it, like by accident, there's an additional confirmation dialog. Do you really want to partially reschedule the product of this job? This will not be limited to recurrent job groups. So that could be really multiple thousand of tests. It might make sense, and I mean, there's a reason why we have that button here, but probably here we would not want to do that if this is just about this cluster. Okay. Big. Yeah, right. Related to that, partial product reschedule, scheduled whole build. So basically what I stated is there was a problem which we fixed, but also there was this ambiguity in how those buttons appear, what they could do. Then what else? Some more setup of machines and two more features that I would like to mention. The first one is full OpenGate test development, maintenance, administration from a browser without the need of a local terminal. So we showcased that how to create a rather complete environment available just from your browser. Let me just show one example going back to, again, the OpenGate and OpenGate test definition. And from GitHub, you can open a code space, which is customized, and that code space is setting up the necessary dependencies so that you can start with test development, triggering tests and such on production instances, as well as run your own OpenGate instance within that transient web development environment. And even if you like, make it available to others, like for example, to show them how a new feature would behave. If you're interested in more details about that, I can recommend that you take a look into the recording of the workshop session from the 14th of June 2024, when Tinita presented how to run OpenQA when all you have is a browser. And the last ticket which I would like to show is the oldest one. So that's a ticket with the number 1800, clean zero, better integration of status from external jobs and testing systems, which we basically just included now by covering that properly in the documentation, because it was already possible for a very long time. If we go to the OpenQA Test Developer Guide on the end, then there's one section telling about the integration of test results from external systems. And that one is explaining by example how one could just trigger tests which show up in the OpenQA web UI, but are not actually conducted by the backend of OS Audience, but for example, could be done by any other external test system or also just to be used for manual test results. And that's something which I would like to demonstrate now. So let me prepare an environment here. And so I have a teammate session. And what we can do here is just use that command. I'm just changing that to go to the remote instance of OpenQA OpenSUSE.org. I'm copy pasting that command, but I'm saying I'm using the additional option to go to O3 and I'm posting a job. I'm calling it my manual test number 42. I'm keeping the rest. Now we can show the ID. So that ID we can use to see the actual, the pasting. But we can do it like this, and then we can see that there is a manual test scheduled. It's not part of any build or any job group because I didn't select that here, but I could. It's staying in scheduled and it will not be picked up by any worker because there's obviously no worker matching the manual, the : manual worker class. I mean, I basically like selected that by convention. I suggest to use that, but one can also do anything which you would like to come up, like do something like a team assignment in there, like team A or team B should pick it up or something like that. Just that there is no automatic OpenQA worker which would pick up that job. Now, as I'm stated, it's staying here in scheduled, and now I can follow the next part, which would be that I'm recording the, let's say I'm recording here manual test results. So actually, let's start with, actually I'm keeping that in schedule because why not? I could also update the status in between. So I'm just posting that comment, like details on external tests. Something like, I was happy to conduct that test. There we go. So that's the idea of the actual comment, but we don't care. We will be able to discover that over the web UI afterwards. And afterwards, I would like to set the result of the test. And in that case, I would like to set it to passed. Oops, sorry. But 03. Is null, result passed. And if we refresh that, then we can see it's passed. Doesn't have any details here. I mean, I didn't upload anything. I could upload logs, but in comments we can see that there are like it would show details on any external test system if we have anything like that. And I was happy to conduct that test. But I could also, same as for any other job over the API, assuming I have the according permissions, could also set the other. Yeah. No, sorry, wait. I cannot. Yeah, right, because set done is really just like for once. However, I could actually now use features by commenting with those pause result feature. For example, I could say failed and then maybe say bug 42 or something. That makes sense. And now if I'm refreshing that job, then I can see that it's actually failed. Okay. So with that, it's possible to also use OpenQA as an test reporting platform, regardless how the actual tests are conducted, like a really simple API to be able to schedule tests, mark them, assign them to according teams, people, workers, whatever, and then set an according result, update result, provide comments and external details. So that concludes the the resolved work that we did in the last period. This last period was 1 month and a little bit more than 2 tickets per calendar day. It's a bit less than the usual due to the team workshop and such, where we focused more on other things, which I will like to talk with you about now. So, upcoming plan. We have the top level view, and that top level view has now basically a free spot for new sagas. Right now we have 2 sagas, OpenQA for SUSE customers and full version control awareness within OpenQA. Now if you check that saga and just take a look on how many tickets still are there are those 13 tasks. And I hope that we are not really adding many more tickets to that. We might want to split some of the still outstanding work, but more or less it should be feasible to resolve that saga in the upcoming weeks. So for example, we would like to ensure that OpenQA clone custom Git respekts works fine with Git only test distribution like auth audience history OpenQA. I showed you before that auth audience history OpenQA has all the complete test definitions and the scenario definitions defined in one repository and a link telling OpenQA check out those tests from this Git repository when cloning. And we found that there's a problem when those tests had been created, and afterwards there can be a problem to use OpenQA clone custom Git respect point to yet another fork. Let's imagine you want to try a pull request to that test distribution, then you would possibly use that tool. It does work by setting needle steer in particular, but that should be streamlined so that it should work by default, just using, just pointing to pull request and a verification test that you would like to run. As a time box spike solution, I'm asking the team to let OpenQA keep test distribution checkouts up to date using the new Git checkout features without needing fetch needles, which is basically like an external script that for us on O3 as well as on OSD is called like every minute in a cron job. But it would be more streamlined and prevent some problems if we actually let OpenQA handle that, like with the minion task and also in any new instance that should then work out of the box so that you don't need to set up this manual cron job. After we could rule out those issues, then it should be possible to create and maintain up-to-date version of test history and needles for the web UI, which should be then enabled by default. So that's why this is in next, and that should come afterwards. Enabled by default means that it's still possible to disable that if you don't want to have that on an instance that OpenQA would automatically clone from external Git repositories. But maybe, we consider it easier if it's just enabled by default. Possible to. then some marketing, training, documentation about new version control features, including that we would like to bump the version to 5.x for OpenGA. So we would call it OpenGA 5, starting with all the features which are basically already there. You could say that we are currently in the beta testing phase of the version control features in the late 4.6 versions, which are all available but optional with feature switches, and then with 5 we'll probably make it enabled by default. That should help us to resolve this epic then, and then there were also some other related minor issues with lower priorities which we'll also look into. So just 13 tickets, so I'm hopeful that we will be able to resolve that soon. And after that, we would pick up another saga, maybe even 2, into our stories here for the upcoming plan. And we can already see which ones are the candidates for that. So let me just show you what's in next regarding the sagas. There's nothing. Okay. I thought already selected some. Let me check. Well, I guess it will be the state-of-the-art user experience for OpenGA. We already defined a lot of new ideas in there. They're also related to the discussions which we had on the OpenSUSE conference and already before, especially with Santiago Zarate as the representative of the SUSE QE Core Squad. We already did some things there, like updating our JavaScript stack dependencies. That's why you also see multiple resolved tickets here we could already do. Upgrading Bootstrap to version 5, which then allows us to use other more recent features. And then one thing which we would like to do is again some older tickets, for example, a better log viewer. And one ticket in particular we already have on the current backlog, which is a generic filtering for the interactive log viewer. So we have the Open QA logs and results feature. But if we just take a look into one log file, I mean, it's already colored. So you can see here, there's some messages showing up, different color. There's green, there's gray, there's blue. But it's a lengthy log file and one cannot use advanced features which we would like to include here. For example, to just filter. So, imagine an input box here, and you could enter a search term, and then based on the search term, only lines matching that search term would show up, and the rest would be collapsed or not shown. With that, let me just shortly mention what else is currently in the backlog. So generic filtering in the interactive log viewer, the fixing of OpenGA clone custom git ref spec for git-only test distribution, problems related to Leap 15.6 upgrade, which we already tried, bringing in newer QEMU version, newer versions of dependencies, newer version of the kernels on OpenGA workers. And then after encountering problems, we rolled back. For example, for S390, we saw a problem with a new version of probably QEMU, that the backend in that configuration doesn't work anymore. So that's something which I would like to be looked at before we go to upgrade all production workers. Someone else. We had some problems with code cover recently, so that we need to fix first before we can continue development again. Yeah, here we had another problem that OpenGA workers can crash with Linux 6.4 after upgrading to Leap 15.6. So, we could go into bisecting, check if it's really just the kernel or some related component, Maybe there's some intermediate kernel which doesn't show that problem. Try to find a way to make it more easily reproduce, report an upstream issue and such. And what's currently in the working is yeah, fixing, for example, the web UI Docker Compose test, and then again NFS mount point related problems, which might be related to which I mentioned before, but it looks like it's actually an issue which we already had for years and was not seen as critical, didn't pop up that often. Now it pops up more often, which gives us a chance to more easily reproduce and probably fix or prevent that. Yeah, and with that, I would like to conclude. And yeah, let's cut it short. Thank you for your attendance and hope to see you again next time. Bye.